G'day, I'm Peter Coleman and welcome to the National Citizens Coalition newscast. Without a doubt, the most pressing issue facing Canadians today is the level of government spending in this country. With the federal debt climbing past $510 billion and combined provincial debt surpassing $350 billion, Canada is well on its way to reaching a public debt level of $1 trillion in the next 5 years. Budget preparations are taking place right now at both provincial and federal levels. As we struggle out of the recession, this budget season is likely the most important in a decade. Without decisive action from the government, Canadians will be facing permanent structural deficits for years. In response, the National Citizens Coalition has launched a campaign that we call 501. The 5 stands for 5% pay cut for all elected officials, provincially and federally. 0 represents a switch to zero-based budgeting to eliminate wasteful spending. Finally, the 1 stands for limiting government spending growth to 1% a year and only hiring 1 new public servant for every 2 that retire. By adopting 501, governments will demonstrate leadership in reining in spending, putting this country in a path to sustainable economic growth. Without such leadership, Canadians will remain mired in debt, and our productivity, international competitiveness, and standard of living will continue to suffer. Here's a brief clip from the National Citizens Coalition recent presentation of the Ontario Budget Committee.
Thank you for an interesting presentation, Mr. Coleman, and a presentation that I must tell you after a week and a half is radically different from most of what we've heard.
There's only one taxpayer, his wallet's empty these days, and his charge card's maxed out. Every department should be looked at and said, do we need this money in this department? If not, where should it go and be used somewhere more effectively?
If you'd like to support our 501 campaign, please visit our website at nationalcitizen.ca and make a contribution. For more on this issue, here's Gloria Fisher with a special report.
Okay, so our federal debt is at $510 billion. That can be a pretty hard number to wrap your head around. If we were to stack 510 billion loonies on top of each other, it would reach 892,500 kilometers. Now, the moon is only 360,000 kilometers away. That means that our debt would reach to the moon and back and still have enough left over to remain a serious problem. As taxpayers, we must all pay this debt. Every man, woman, and child in Canada now owes approximately $25,000. And that is only at the federal level. In the private sector, if a company was facing the prospect of multiple billion-dollar losses year over year, changes would be made. Government should be no different. Yet, incredibly, some governments continue to go on spending and taxing. This disconnection between politicians and the public must be addressed. Ontario and BC are both bringing in the harmonized sales tax on Canada Day of this year, despite overwhelming public opinion against the tax in both provinces. How can we ensure that our elected officials represent us? That they're there to do the bidding of the people and not just whatever they want? They must be held accountable. And so yes, Dalton, yes, Gordon, we will be reminding voters of your record when the next provincial elections draw near. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you for that report, Gloria. Canadians certainly deserve more from their elected officials. We'll be doing everything possible to make sure that happens. As part of this effort, the National Citizens Coalition is today announcing the Porky Awards. We'll be nominating the worst of the big-time government spenders throughout the year, and the most wasteful will be named the winners, rather losers, annually. For this edition of National Citizens Coalition newscast, we feel compelled to nominate several MLAs from Nova Scotia, representing all major political parties. They've been caught with their hands in a cookie jar and making unscrupulous expense claims. Please visit nationalcitizen.ca for more on the stories it develops. We will be investigating and reporting which MLAs and MPPs support expense reform across the country. Thank you very much for joining us. This has been another edition of the National Citizens Coalition newscast.